We're going to be taking a look at different diameter needle sizes and how they affect the final line and the final shading of your work. So I'm using the Miceya Nymph PMU machine, and I have it set at about 7 volts. So these are BigWasp cartridges, and this is their first generation cartridge. You can see that because it is white, and this is a 10 diameter needle. There are 3 needles in the configuration in a liner formation, so this is a 3RL, and you can see I wrote here it's a 10 diameter. So I wanted to start with the first generation cartridge because it's what I had, and it's a 10 diameter, and I wanted to be able to show the difference in the thickness. So that's why I'm using this one, but we'll be using the energy for the other cartridges. So I'm starting off with just a single line so that you can see the thickness of it. And I'm using Permablend Ginger Brown for my pigment. There's no significance to that, it's just the one that I grabbed. So now I'm just doing a little bit of shading. Some people call this stippling, some people call it whip shading or pendulum shading. Some people call it pixelating or pixel shading. It's just a speckling of dots. And it's really important that your hand speed matches your needle speed. So if you find that the needle is getting caught in the skin, or it's sticking, or it's just not giving you good consistent dotting, then you want to play around with the difference in your hand speed and the needle speed until you get it to match. And you'll know that it matches because it just feels right, and it gives you the desired outcome, which is, of course, a soft speckling of dots. So now I'm switching to the energy cartridge, and you can see that it's orange. It's a completely different design, and we're sticking with the 3RL for the grouping, but this one is an 0.6 diameter. And sometimes if the plastic is in there and it starts to rattle, it makes a little bit louder of a noise. So just adjust that real quick, and now we're back. So again, this is the 0.6 diameter. So all the needles in this grouping, the 3 needles in this round liner grouping, are a 0.6 diameter, which is obviously smaller than the 10. So we're going to see a finer line, a thinner line here. And let's see how that looks with the stipple shading as well. So what I really love about these cartridges, the energy cartridge, is that it has a really slim precision tip, and I absolutely love it. And one of the fears in having a tip that's this thin is whether or not the pigment is going to flow. So if you're using thicker pigments, it might not work very well for this. You want a nice thin pigment, and Permablend and the Permablend line all give a much thinner dilution than some of the other lines. So that's why I choose this to work with the Permablend, because I can still get a nice pigment flow and have a very thin precision tip. So you can see I've done some stippling here, and we've got like a nice shadow going on. We're going to change now to the 0.4 diameter, and again, it is a 3RL, but it is a 0.4, so it's going to give us an even thinner, finer line, and you'll see that right about now. So with this one, the 0.4 is such a thin line, and because the needles are the diameter itself is so small, that liner configuration is able to pull in really tight, and it's giving a 1RL, but there are 3 needles here. So you can definitely use this for very detailed fine line work, or the 0.6 as well, in lieu of a 1RL. And there's a variety of reasons why you would choose to use a 3 instead of a 1, but it is my preference, so that's why I'm showing it to you here. So I'm doing, again, some stippling and just a little cross hatching. So if you are learning stippling, you want to make sure that you don't stay in the same direction all the time, because you're going to get lines or tracks. And so if you want to get a nice even spacing of your stippling, then you want to cross hatch. I find that working on practice pads or practice skin, that the best way to clean them is to use a little bit of Vaseline and a dry cloth. So this is the 3 needles that we started with. The first one is the first generation 12 diameter, and then a 6, and then a 4. And you can see that the line gets progressively thinner and smaller, or thinner and finer, and how that affects the shading as well. So now, just to have a look at how that looks against a thicker diameter 1 RL, I'm going to switch to the second generation cartridge, because it's just what I happen to have. And this is a 12 1 RL. So the 12 represents the diameter of the needle, and that is thicker. It's 1 gauge up from the 10 that we looked at first, and then it's twice as large as the 6 and even larger than the 04. So we're gonna now look at that liner. And again, this is a 1 RL. So this is just one single needle, which you would expect to be a thinner line than the 3 RL. But because the 3 RLs were done with thinner diameters, of course, we're getting a much thinner, finer line. So again, this is just to kind of show you the difference, and then we'll look at them next to each other in comparison in a moment. And these have all been standard taper, and which is about a medium taper, and untextured. I have not changed the voltage of my machine. I use the same machine, the same pigment, the same hand movements. Everything is exactly the same except the needle cartridges. That way we can really get a look at how diameter size affects the needle. And again, just a little cross hatching so that we get a nice even distribution of dots. And I'm just wiping with plain cheap Vaseline. So now we can take a look at them side by side, and you'll see they're very, very similar. When you get real close to them, you are able to see that there are, differences in the softness of the lines as the needle gets finer and thinner. But for the most part, the point here is to show that you can use a 3RL and still get a thinner line, a thinner, finer line than the 1RL in a larger needle configuration. And so that's it. These are the energy cartridges in the 6 and the 4 diameter size. The 06 and the 04 are diameters in the 3RL that I use regularly for either eyeliner, like a winged or really sharp liner, or hair strokes, and even to outline the lips. I don't use the 3RL for that. I usually use a 5 or a 7, but I do like the smaller needle configurations because they are a finer point and they do get the needles closer together. Use code ANGELA15 for 15% off. Link is in the description and in my bio.